Boris Johnson reacted too late to Corona, a mistake that takes revenge. The crash of the British economy is more dramatic than the slump in other countries. But that's not all. The Prime Minister could soon make the next mistake. Rarely does a top politician have such a questionable record after a few years as Boris Johnson. Back in 2016, the Conservative with charisma helped British EU opponents gain a narrow majority in the referendum on leaving the EU. It hardly bothered him that he led his popular Brexit campaign with rather dubious claims. Because he has achieved his goal, he has forced his internal party competitor David Cameron to resign from the office of Prime Minister. The country had to pay dearly for the Brexit decision. By the end of 2019, British economic output was around 3% behind the trend in the years before the referendum. Insecure companies restricted their investments on the island after the Brexit referendum. Relative to the trend in previous years, the investment gap was around 15% by the end of 2019. The UK has barely left the EU at the end of January this year, when the next mistake followed. Instead of paying close attention to what was happening on the continent, Johnson, who has resided as Prime Minister at 10 Downing Street only since July 2019, has found his own way in dealing with the virus. Actually, the island had at least as good conditions as Germany to get the pandemic under control. The number of people returning from skiing holidays in northern Italy, which became the first corona hotspot in Europe, was limited. But while the number of detected infections shot up from an initially low level in March, Johnson hesitated for 8 days before finally imposing a tough lockdown. At a time when the virus was spreading, exponentially even, those days made all the difference. Hardly any other country in Europe recorded such a high excess mortality rate from March to May as Great Britain. After all, Johnson apparently learned that lesson. Since he was in intensive care with COVID-19 at the beginning of April, he has become more cautious in dealing with the virus. Since the pandemic spread widely in the United Kingdom, the country was only able to relax the corona restrictions much later and more slowly than that was the case almost everywhere else in Europe. After all, Great Britain managed to significantly reduce the number of new infections. It is currently becoming apparent that London will not take a special route with a new increase in the numbers of cases, but will rather react with caution like other countries in Europe. Johnson's mistake in March has left a deep mark on the economy. While Germany had been on the up again since the end of April, significant parts of the British economy remained largely shut down until the beginning of June. Accordingly, British economic output slumped by 20.4% in the second quarter. In Germany, the decline of 10.1% was only half as bad. Even the countries in the Eurozone that were hit early by the pandemic, such as Italy, Spain and France, got off lightly. For the Eurozone as a whole, the decline was 12.1%. Unlike in federally constituted Germany, where many decisions between the federal and state levels are discussed for a long time and the competences are distributed over several state levels, Great Britain is governed centrally. London determines what applies across the country or, in some areas, at least across England. If the top makes a mistake, there is hardly any authority that can counteract it. Johnson may already be heading for a third mistake. In June, he decided against extending the transition period during which his country is still a member of the EU internal market and its customs union. The end of 2020 will mean it's all over. How to proceed after that is still in the stars. Despite some progress in detail, the positions of the EU and the UK on their future economic relations are still far apart. And time is running out. In order to be able to ratify an agreement, there should actually be a result in October at the latest. If Great Britain actually leaves the domestic market at the end of the year without a comprehensive follow-up agreement, the British economy could be hit hard again. So far, the EU has been by far the most important trading partner of the British. The country earns around 13% of its economic output from exports to the large EU. Conversely, it is only around 3%. Even if the transition could be cushioned somewhat, with a few transitional rules for particularly sensitive sectors, the loss of preferential access to the EU internal market could push Britain trend growth down to 1.5% from around 2% before the Brexit referendum. In the short term, there is also a risk of significant traffic jams at the borders and great uncertainty about the exact bureaucratic procedures that would have to be followed in the future. Johnson is made up of leaps and bounds. Last autumn, by changing course at the last minute, he ensured that there was still an agreement to leave the EU. Contrary to his previous assurances, he has agreed to de facto leave Northern Ireland in the EU internal market in order to avoid internal Irish border controls. This time too, it is conceivable that Johnson will soften the British position at the last moment so that the economic Brexit can be carried out in an orderly manner and that the country retains preferential access to the EU market, at least in some areas. But you don't want to bet properly on such last-minute insight. And if you now want to know more about European politics from a German point of view, YouTube's chosen another of my videos right here in the end screen for you, right next to your chance to subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in my next video. Click and enjoy. Viel Spaß!